This week in the Southern Discourse kitchen, we're cooking up these lightly sweet and delightful rosemary butter cookies. You're gonna love them, so let's get started. These little cookies are the perfect treat. You're gonna love them with a cup of tea, a hot cup of coffee, in the afternoons, in the mornings, and even as a simple dessert after dinner. So let's talk about these ingredients. We're gonna start with 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 sticks or a cup of butter. I've got 2 large eggs, a lemon, we're going to zest this lemon. We've got some granulated sugar, a teaspoon of vanilla, some sparkling sugar that we're going to finish our cookies with, fresh rosemary, and that's it. So just like with most baking recipes, we're going to start with mixing together our dry ingredients, then mixing together our wet ingredients, and then putting the 2 together. When you're mixing those dry ingredients, it's really important to get accurate measurements. The best way is to weigh those ingredients on a scale, but if you don't have one, what I like to call the spoon and level method is one of the best methods. And what we do is we're going to spoon the flour into a measuring cup. We're not going to pack it. We just spoon it lightly in there. Then we take a knife and we level off the top, making sure that any gaps or holes are filled in. And this is going to give you a really nice, accurate measurement. Now we've got 2 cups of spooned and leveled all-purpose flour, and now we're ready to mix in some salt. And it's important to level off your salt and your other spices, just like you do that flour, so you get a good, accurate measurement every time. And now to these dry ingredients, we're going to add a little bit of chopped fresh rosemary. Now rosemary, if you've not ever worked with it before, has a really light, piney smell. It's quite delicious, and when you chop it, it's super easy. What we're going to do is we're going to go right underneath the top little bunch, and we just pull down and we strip off all those leaves. Most of the leaves come off from that first little strip, and then you just kind of pluck the rest. We'll do one more. You just run your finger down the stem. See, those leaves come off so easily. And then we gather them up in a little pile, and you just chop them up. We don't want too fine of pieces. We don't want them to get lost in our cookies. Something like that. And it's really easy. One of the wonderful things about working with the herbs is you get to enjoy their wonderful aromas as you work with them. That's just so light and fresh. If you want to use a dried rosemary, if that's what you've got in your pantry, this recipe is 2 tablespoons of fresh rosemary. That transfers to 2 teaspoons of dried rosemary. And dried rosemary works. You just miss out on the experience of that working with the aromatics and the nice fresh ingredients. So we're going to add that chopped rosemary right in, and we'll just use a fork and lightly toss those dry ingredients together. So now we're ready to mix together these wet ingredients. And we've got 3/4 cups of white granulated sugar, and we're going to mix it with 2 sticks or a cup of butter. Now let's talk about our butter for a minute, because it needs to be room temperature, and room temperature butter is probably a little bit cooler than what you would think it would be. So when I touch room temperature butter, it should be tacky, maybe like a firm clay, but it should not be shiny, and I shouldn't be able to press my finger into it. And so we just want it to be tacky. Like I said, not shiny, or definitely not anything that you could press. We could put the stick of butter in just like this, but it kind of mixes better if you cut it into little pats. And if you've forgotten to take your butter out of the fridge, cutting it into little pats like this will help it come to room temperature a little bit more quickly. So you could cut it into pats, have it sitting in the mixer waiting on you while you mix together your dry ingredients and preheat your oven and that sort of thing, and it would come to room temperature. Now we're going to add 2 large egg yolks to our wet ingredients. And when you have to separate the egg yolk from the egg white, there's lots of fancy ways that you can do it with the eggshell, but one of these tools right here is actually the easiest and best way to do it. So you crack the egg over it, that yolk is caught right there in the middle, and you can use a knife to help the egg white get off or the egg white separate, and you get a nice clean egg yolk right there. So our last wet ingredient is going to be the zest of 1 lemon, and it just takes a second to zest that lemon. And the only thing that you have to remember is that when you're doing this, you don't want to zest or grate down past the yellow into the white. The yellow part of the rind is where all of the flavor and the oils are, and the white part can get kind of bitter. Now it's time to add these dry ingredients into those wet ingredients. And we'll turn the mixer on at a low speed, and we'll just add them a little bit at a time. You'll hear the mixer bog down a little bit, and the dough will separate and kind of look like wet sand. And when it comes back together, you'll know that it's ready. Now we're ready to make our cookies. So we've taken our dough from the mixing bowl and we've dumped it out onto a piece of parchment paper. You could use a silicone baking mat if you wanted to. And we're just going to separate the dough into 2 equal parts, or as close to equal as we can get them. And we're going to gently mold them into a 2-inch diameter log. So they'll stick to the paper some. So I'm going to hold the paper down with one hand and I'm going to roll with the other. Just coming back a little bit every now and then to mash it together where I need to. And this looks about right. I've got a 2-inch biscuit cutter or cookie cutter here, and I'm just going to kind of measure. All right, so that's about 2 inches. And I'm going to make sure that the ends are nice and squared off. We don't want them to be pinched because those obviously will be smaller cookies, and we want all of our cookies to be as close to the same size as we can get them. All right, now we're ready for the next log. So now we've got both of our 2-inch logs ready to go, and we've got some white sparkling or finishing sugar. And we're just going to generously sprinkle that out on our parchment paper. And we're going to roll our logs right through that sugar. Look at that nice, pretty finish. This is going to give a great edge to our cookies. We're going to end up slicing these logs. We're going to get about 2 dozen cookies in all, and this will just have a nice finished edge. Got any spaces that aren't picking up sugar the way you want them to, just grab you a handful, sprinkle it on there, get it nice and coated. So now that both logs have been rolled in sugar, we're ready for our next step. And I wish you guys were here with me in the kitchen working with this dough. It smells so delicious. You can smell that rosemary, you can smell the lemon. It's one of the joys of cooking with really nice ingredients. So we've got a piece of saran wrap here. And we're just going to take these logs, we'll put them on the saran wrap, and we're going to just roll them up. Nice and easy. We'll take these edges. This helps keep everything nice and round. Any kind of misshaping that might have happened while you're rolling, the tossing helps keep everything nice and round. We're going to put these in the freezer for about an hour just to get that butter and everything reset before we bake them. So we've gotten our dough out of the freezer, and we're going to do about 1/2 inch slices. We're just going to get in there and try to go slow and easy and slice straight through. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to place our cookies on a parchment lined or a silicone baking mat lined cookie sheet, about an inch or so apart. They're not going to spread a lot. And we're going to pop them in a 350 oven for 14 to 16 minutes. So we've taken our rosemary butter cookies from the oven. And you know when they're done, when they start to get just a little brown around the edges. We don't want them too brown, we just want them just a little bit of brown around the edges. So like I said before, you're gonna love this with a hot cup of tea, a little bit of coffee, even with a glass of milk. This is such a light and tasty cookie. It's almost like a shortbread. You're gonna love how it has a snap, but then it's also soft in the center. I know you're gonna find 100 reasons to make and serve these cookies. So I can't wait to see them on your table really soon. If you like this recipe, don't forget to subscribe, not just to the YouTube channel, but to southerndiscourse.com, where I'm cooking up the Southern food that you know and love. Plus, you get access to my new series, Dinner with Friends, and you're not going to want to miss out on that. Not to mention our weekly meal plans, where we're putting together our recipes and making meals that your family is going to love. From the kitchen to the table, I've got you covered.